Hello and welcome to another episode of Knowing the Law on Legal Studies TV. Today we are going to look at another interesting topic. Okay, so to follow me and also to learn more on legal matters, kindly subscribe to the YouTube channel Legal Studies TV into bracket Eric Frempong attached to it, okay, so that anytime I post a video, you'll be alerted and will be able to watch and educate ourselves. Okay, so kindly subscribe to the YouTube channel. So today we are going to look at whether spouses or relatives can work together at the same workplace or working environment. Can married couples work in the same employment setting or working environment? Can you work in the same workplace with your mother, with your sister, with your father, with your uncle, with your aunt, with your grandmother, with your grandfather? Okay, name them. So this is what we are going to look at. And we look at what is the position of the law on that. Is there any law prohibiting spouses or relatives from working together in the same workplace or in the same working environment? We are going to look at that. Okay. So the question is, can spouses or relatives work at the same workplace or in the same working environment? So the simple answer to this question is yes. Yes. Spouses or relatives can work at the same workplace or in the same working environment. And this is because there is absolutely no law prohibiting spouses or relatives from working in the same workplace. There's absolutely no law. At least to the best of my knowledge, there's absolutely no law prohibiting um, spouses or relatives from working together in the same working environment or in the same workplace or in the same employment setting. Okay. So now I would say that there are three main laws that talks about employment and um, conduct of public offices. Okay, so we are going to look into these laws and see whether these laws prohibit spouses or relatives from working together in the same workplace. Okay, so whenever spouses or relatives are to work in the same workplace, the concern that arises is conflict of interest. The concern of conflict of interest. Okay, so we are going to look at what the Constitution talks about conflict of interest. Then we will look at the other laws. So as I said, there are three main laws that talks about employment and conduct of public offices. So one is the Constitution, two is the Labor Act, Act 651. Then there's a bill in Parliament called the Conduct of Public Officers Bill. Okay, so these are the three main laws that talks about conflict of interest, conduct of public officers, and employment in general. Okay, so we are going to look at these laws. So we first look at what the Constitution says. So Article 284 of the 1992 Constitution, which talks about code of conduct for public officers, makes no mention of spouses or relatives working together in the same working environment. Okay, so if you go into the Constitution, which is the Article 284, which talks about code of conduct for public officers, it absolutely makes no mention. It absolutely makes no mention of spouses or relatives working together in the same working environment. Okay, yes. So let's look at what that article says. Article 284 of the 1992 Constitution provides that a public officer shall not put himself in a position where his personal interest conflicts or is likely to conflict with the performance of the functions of his office. Okay. Uh-huh. So that is what that article says. And this article does not prohibit couples or spouses or relatives from working in the same workplace or employment setting. Okay. So that's what the Constitution says. It says that a public officer is not to put himself in a position whereby his personal interests may conflict with the performance of the functions of his office. Okay, so what this um, article is trying to say is that it is not saying that you cannot work in the same workplace with your wife or your relatives. Okay, what it's saying is that if even if you are working in the same workplace with your wife or with your spouse or with any of your relatives, what you have to do is you are not to put yourself in a situation whereby your personal interests may conflict with the functions of your office. So what it means is, let's say, assuming I am working with my wife at the same workplace, okay, and my wife, um, you know, engages in some indisciplined actions or indisciplined acts, and indisciplinary action is going to be taken against her, and disciplinary committee is set up, and I have been elected or appointed to that disciplinary committee to look into that matter, the matter of indiscipline that my wife has committed. Since the matter is concerning my wife, who I happen to work with her in the same um, workplace, I am not supposed to put myself in that position. So, what I have to do is to declare my interest in that matter and recuse myself from that committee. Okay, so that is all that the Constitution under Article 284 is trying to tell us. It is not saying that we are not supposed or we cannot work together in the same workplace. Okay, so as we move on, you'll get to understand. So that is what the Constitution says. Now, let's look at the Labor Act. As I said, there are three main laws: the Constitution, the Labor Act, and the Conduct of Public Officers Bill, which is yet to be passed. So let's look at the Labor Act. The Labor Act 2003, Act 651, also makes no provisions prohibiting spouses or relatives from working in the same workplace or working environment. So if you go into the Labor Act 2003, Act 651, it makes no mention which sought to prohibit spouses or relatives from working together in the same workplace or in the same employment setting. Okay, so that is the labor law for you. Now let's come to the Conduct of Public Officers Bill, which is yet to be passed. And this bill, when passed, is going to regulate the conduct of public officers. Okay, so let's look into that bill and see if the bill has provided for the prohibition of what? Spouses or relatives from working together or not. Okay, so let's go into the bill. So the Conduct of Public Officers Bill 2018, which is yet to be passed into law, also makes no provisions prohibiting spouses or relatives from working in the same working environment or workplace. Okay, so that bill too does not does not make any mention does not make no any mention or does not make any provision prohibiting spouses or relatives from working together in the same workplace or working environment. Okay, so let's go into that bill and see what the bill talks about when it comes to avoidance of conflict of interest. Okay, so section 23(1) of the Conduct of Public Officers Bill provides that A public officer shall not act in a manner that puts that public officer in a position where the personal interest of the public officer conflicts or is likely to conflict with the official functions of the public officer. Okay, so that is what section 23(1) of the conduct of public officers also says. It's just like what the Article 284 of the 1992 Constitution also says. Okay, so I will not waste much time over there. Now let's go to subsection 2 of section 23 of the Conduct of Public Officers Bill. Subsection 2 also provides a public officer whose personal interest conflicts with the official functions of that public officer shall A. Declare the personal interest to the head of the public body in which the public officer is employed, the commission or another appropriate body, in writing, orally, or in any other manner prescribed by law, and the public officer shall comply with any directions to avoid or resolve the conflict. Okay, so what this subsection is saying is that a public officer whose personal interest conflicts with the official functions of that public officer. So whenever there's a situation whereby the public officer, your personal interest is conflicting with the performance of your functions, what you have to do is, one, you have to declare the personal interest to your head, the head of that public body, okay, in which you are employed, or to the commission. The commission we are talking about, I think the Labor Commission, or another appropriate body. And that declaration can be made in written, orally, or in any other manner prescribed by law. Okay, and aside declaring your interest, you also have to comply with any directives given in order to avoid or resolve the conflict. Okay, so that is what subsection 2A says. Now, so let's look at B. B says, not be present at or participate in any deliberations in connection with that matter. So after you have declared your intentions, you have declared your interest in the matter, you also have to absent yourself or participate in any what deliberations in connection with that matter. So as I said, I'm working with my wife in the same workplace. My wife has engaged in indisciplinary act. Disciplinary committee has been set up. I have been elected to that committee. What I have to do is, there's going to be a conflict of interest. So I have to declare the interest that I have in the matter, okay, and comply with any directives that will be given in order to help avoid or resolve that interest in that conflict. Aside doing that too, I need not to be present, or what I need to do is to absent myself, okay, or not to participate in any deliberations in connection with that matter. So after making the declaration, I have to recuse myself from being part of that committee. That is all that the law is trying to tell us. It does not say that we cannot work in the same workplace. Okay, so that is what subsection 2 also says. Now let's go to subsection 3. Okay, subsection 3 also provides a public officer who complies with subsection 2A is not liable for a matter that arises from the declaration. So once there is going to be a conflict of interest and you declare the interest that you have in that matter and comply with the directives, subsection 3 is saying that you are no longer liable. So you cannot be held liable for any for any offense or for a matter that arises from that declaration that you made. Okay, so that is what subsection 3 also says. Okay, so now let's look at um, uh, the duty that has been imposed to a public officer who is to face conflict of interest, or who is likely to face conflict of interest under section 24. Okay, the duty to what? To report. Okay, let's look at that one too. So section 24 also provides for duty to report. Here, a public officer is obliged to report any situation which gives rise to, or is likely to give rise to, a conflict of interest, and to also report any situation where the public officer is in doubt about whether the situation gives rise to, or is likely to give rise to, a conflict of interest. Okay, so here there's a duty imposed on every public officer. That is the duty to report in a situation whereby a public officer, see himself in a situation that give rise to conflict of interest, or the situation is likely to give rise to conflict of interest. You are duty bound to report such a situation. Okay, so you have to report whenever there's a situation that gives rise to conflict of interest, or that situation is likely to give rise to conflict of interest. You are duty bound to report such a situation. And also, whenever a public officer, you are in doubt of a situation, whether that situation gives rise to conflict of interest, or is likely to give rise to conflict of interest, you are also to what? You are duty bound to report such situations as well. So whenever there is a situation which you are not sure of, whether which puts you in doubt whether that situation gives rise to conflict of interest, or is likely to give rise to conflict of interest, the law imposes what? A duty on you to report such situations. Okay, so this is all that the law says. This is all that our laws says. Our law say it does not prohibit spouses or relatives from working in the same workplace or in the same employment setting. Okay, so there is a misconception out there. I've been hearing people saying that um, spouses are not supposed to work in the same workplace or in the same work environment. That is against the law. It is against no law, and that is what that misconception that we have cured today. There's absolutely no law prohibiting spouses or relatives from working together in the same workplace or in the same working environment. Okay, so let's know all these things. It's very, very interesting. Let's be aware of these laws. Okay, so employer who tries to um, victimize you just because that you are working with your spouse or your relative in the same workplace, is what? It's an abuse, because there's no law prohibiting um, spouses or relatives from working in the same workplace. Okay, so let's be aware of these laws. Okay, at times some spouses may end up in the same place working together, and one will say that it is unlawful. They are not supposed to work in that workplace, and at times one may be transferred. They may be transferred. One of them, or they may be transferred from their workplace. Transfer is allowed, but don't base it on the reason that they are couples or spouses and they are not supposed to work in the same workplace. That one there is not, it shouldn't be tolerated. It shouldn't be tolerated, because there's no law that prohibits that. Okay, so let's learn all these laws and be aware of all these laws. Okay, So I'll end it here. Thank you all very much for your attention. So as I said, subscribe to the YouTube channel, Legal Studies TV, Eric Frimpong attached to it, and let's educate ourselves. Thank you very much.